Press on 2 legs.
All right, the peanut gallery's warmed up. I love it. I guess when I think about the genesis of this this book, it really began about a year ago when I acquired an old iron hand press. As you know, I do traditional letterpress printing and handbook binding, and I was just interested in going deeper into the traditional techniques with the traditional equipment. And this is an advertisement page from, I think, the 20s for the actual press that I have. This is an Ostrander Seymour iron hand press. It's the metal version of the old wooden common press, which is what Ben Franklin and Gutenberg used, or something similar mechanism there too. And so about a year ago, I welcomed Ben, it's affectionately called, into our shop. And after I spent, how many months did it take me to get it back together? I'm not really sure, but anyway, all 1,000-pound bits of it got back together eventually, and I played with it a little bit last summer, just learning about how it works, because it works a bit different from the other printing presses that I have in the shop. And it was kind of, it was fun to sort of bond. And then I began to think, as the fall came around, well, what is a good, here, I can pass this around, Mike, if you want to take a look. What is a good first project for me to continue learning traditional printing techniques on a traditional old iron hand press? And so the song, of course, came to mind. Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. When you read, you begin with ABC. And when you print a book of poetry on an iron hand press, I begin with Emily Dickinson. I was named for Emily Dickinson. My mother loves Emily Dickinson. And she read poetry. My mother read poetry to me from the womb on. And so I was really steeped in those words and that ethos and those emotions and that language and that way of being in the world that is so attentive to what is right here in front of us. And so I thought, well, we'll start at that beginning, which is my beginning, my poetic, which begins with Emily Dickinson. And as I begin to think about the kind of book, this is my very old and tattered copy of Emily Dickinson, which is falling apart, but 'tis beloved. As I begin to think about the kind of small little project that I thought I could manage to create on an old iron hand press, a couple of poems of Emily Dickinson's came to mind, and then it sort of evolved into, well, maybe this isn't just Emily Dickinson, maybe this is a collaboration, you know? Maybe it's Emily Dickinson, Emily Hancock, and a meadow, which, as you'll see in the title page of the book, if you come to look at it or purchase it, the title lists 3 authors, Dickinson, myself, and our meadow. Nature is as important to me as words. The nature of words and the words of nature are part of my root as well. And so I began to think about doing nature printing, which I learned about at a conference last fall. And so I began to dry little grasses, such as these guys, these little green foxtail grasses, and what is this, Charles Johnson grass, which is, what is that, some sort of sedge? Oh, all right. Well,
it's a grass.
It's a grass, okay. The authority has spoken, this is a grass. And I just love the shapes of them. I mean, they're so beautiful all in themselves. And first I thought about, well, I'll do some lino block cutting and reproduce, but no, let's print the grass itself, you know? So I began to dry some, and then when I began to print, I actually printed from live plants. Don't tell PETA. Anyway, the plants that are represented in the book are this, as Charles says, a grass, which is this one, which I just, I rolled out some ink very lightly on an ink slab, placed the grass down, patted it gently with on the ink, and then took with my trusty tweezers and laid it down on the page of the book and then patted it gently on the page. And you see, they reproduce amazingly, just in themselves, and they're so pretty. This is a lovely little one, correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, Pennsylvania bittercress, which is a sweet little plant. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, you can pass this one. Whatever. And then we have the green foxtail grass. This was actually dried because I love the seed head. The seed head is so beautiful. And here we have clover and wild onion, which I printed. We live in a beautiful place, as everybody here knows. And so I just walked out my print shop door and began to harvest illustrations, so to speak. And then the last one is of the sweet little wild strawberry, which just began coming up last week. I was like, oh, I gotta print that! And so it becomes the illustration for the last poem in the book. So that was really a joy. The unofficial title for this book, the title's Reverie. The unofficial title that I call it sort of within myself is Poems for the Regreening of the World. And you know, there's a lot going on in the world right now, as we know, some wonderful things and some horrendous things. But I think this book for me was a way to reconnect and to recognize, to celebrate, to attend to the little beauty at our feet. You know? Like I say, when I walk out the print shop door and I see those little bits of bittercress blooming, and I had never known bittercress before. I mean, I'm sure I'd noticed it, but I didn't know what it was. But to look closely and deeply, and to receive the beauty that's right there. You know, it may be small, it may be easily overlooked, but it's here, it's all around us. And so that was the inspiration for this book. And I hope if you all look at it, that some of that might be taken in a bit. You know, and the first day of spring is a lovely day to do that. So thanks all for coming, and I thought I would read a couple of poems, if I may, and then take questions, if anybody has questions about the process or anything like that. But I thought I'd read the two main poems, and I'll read the Dickinson one first because she comes first. And this is the poem with the foxtail illustration. The grass so little has to do, a sphere of simple green with only butterflies to brood and bees to entertain, and stir all day to pretty tunes the breezes fetch along, and hold the sunshine in its lap and bow to everything, and thread the dews all night like pearls, and make itself so fine a duchess were too common for such a noticing. And even when it dies to pass in odors so divine as lowly spices gone to sleep, or amulets of pine, and then to dwell in sovereign barns and dream the days away, the grass so little has to do, I wish I were the hay. I love that poem. I love that poem. It's wonderful. And then my homage to Emily, my poem that comes next. And this poem, I'll just say just a second about the genesis. This is actually a much older poem of mine. I think I wrote it, I don't know, maybe, wow, 20 years ago, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. As I was recovering from illness, I was in grad school, worn out, had gotten sick, and it was one April day that I was just laying back in the new green grass by my apartment complex, slowly feeling the sap beginning to rise in me again, feeling like, all right, I'm not gonna die, I am gonna make it through. And I wrote this poem. Pardon me, is this your clover? Please excuse, I didn't know. Though when I heard you thrice drone by, I feared it might be so. Lying here in new spring sun was all of my intent. Keeping you from tea for two was certainly ne'er meant. By all means, resume your table. Ah, here comes the maitre d'. I'll settle here by Woodsy Pier, adjacent to reserved for B. Thank you. So that's a taste of what's in there. And does anyone have any questions or thoughts about the product or the process or the printing or poetry. Or
Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing online to educate people about how your process is?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that has been amazing, one of the amazing gifts to me that I've received on this journey of letterpress printing, traditional printing, and handbook binding is how much the greater printing community has given me. I mean, it really is kind of an apprenticeship, so to speak, that I've been engaged with these printers, some through email, online, some going to meet them, and I've really felt strongly about passing that on as I receive it. And so I have if any of you are interested, I have a blog on my website where I post fun things like a letterpress lexicon, where you learn about fun things called coin keys and composing sticks and the tools of the trade. And sometimes I teach classes, but for me, this kind of handcraft is really passed hand to hand. And so that's been an important part of what I do as well. So thank you. Michael.
Can you say a little bit about, as a poet writing and that craft and your experience and how you the relationship you have to then working with making the books and prints? Do you see, the affinity, and do you feel that affinity between being writing as a poet and making chapbooks?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't come to it. I think as a person who loves poetry and a person who writes poetry. When I used to work at Staunton Soup, as many of you know, which is where I met most of you actually, across the counter. One day, the owner, Mary Catherine, and I were out gathering books at a book sale and to bring back to the store, and I found box of poetry books somewhere. I was always going for the box of poetry books, this book, and it happened to be a fine letterpress printed handbound book of really fine poetry. And that was my secular epiphany right there, my aha moment of how much those fine words and this handcraft could go together, and that really kicked me off, and I went down the rabbit hole of traditional printing because I don't know, the care that one has to take letter by letter, I mean, you're a wonderful writer. There are many wonderful writers here in this room, and as I'm composing a poem word by word or image by image or however it comes and spins and manifests, and then to go down to the print shop and the same word is used to compose type and lay it out. It's a very it's a process of much affinity. To take these little individual letters, and if you want to come up and see these in a minute, feel free. And here's the little B that got printed. You have to see the little B. But these are actual things. I mean, the language in printing, these are physical things, and the spaces are physical things, and the language with which I write, the poems are real things. And to me, it's the best way to represent poetry. This kind of handcraft. So I very much think it goes. A little biased.
And a word about the binding.
Oh, the binding. Sure.
Is that a single strand of thread?
It is one single long strand of thread that I measured and cut, and then it goes through lots and lots of times. This binding is a Japanese version of a Chinese style from the 17th century. It's called kangxi, and it's sort of the decorative version of kangxi. It's called hemp leaf binding. But yeah, it's one long string, and the first thing to do is to make sure the book is all centered, and then I use a little template and punch the holes where I figured out where I need them, and then just thread the needle and follow the pattern. And amazingly, somebody hundreds of years ago figured out that there was a pattern that ended up like this, and it's so beautiful.
And every book comes out the same?
Theoretically. That's what we go for. But in reality, one of the other beauties of handcraft is it's really not the same.
Uniqueness.
Uniqueness, exactly. The thumbprint of the maker, as they were, or the mistake of the maker. Anyway, so
The paper stock is lovely. What was your choice of paper stock?
oh, thanks. I there are many worlds to discover as I discovered the world of traditional printing, and paper is one of those worlds. The covers are a wonderful light cover stock called Speckle Tone Cord Tone Cream from French Paper Company. It's a long title, but it's lovely paper. They are I think a 6th generation mill in Michigan. They use only hydroelectric power from the river there. That's been their power source for however many years, decades, and it's a great company, and they have wonderful papers. In the interior are there's 2 different ones actually. They look very similar, but one is a German Zerkal mold-made paper, and one is a French Reeves mold-made paper that I get from Dolphin Paper Company in Indiana, which is a great little paper company. And some of the papers have what I call live edges, which is lovely, a little deco left at the end of the paper making process. So, oh, and then the interleaving paper. This is called glassine. It's paper, it's cotton, but it's very thin. That's meant to just add another layer of protection to the plant printings. So that gets overlaid there.
Can someone use that right to them? You got a copy of that here and have to use a press here, or you have to use a press which also already uses that paper?
The paper can be, well, these particular papers can be used in most presses. Like if you have like a digital printing press or something like that, this is going to be too thick for that, I think. But the same company makes other paper that's meant for modern printing presses.
It has a similar quality.
Yes, exactly. They all have sample books that they're glad to send you to let you feel the different ones and find the right paper for your equipment and application. Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to be with you all on the first day of spring and to have you just be in reverie with me a little bit with poetry and language and printing and blooming. So thank you, and feel free to come up. This is all show and tell tactile fun. So do come up and take a look at the book. And,
Tell them about your pages.
oh, right.